Stretch, as in you're the tallest player?
No, Stretch is I'm the only one who can still touch her knee.
Remember, Saturday nights on NBC meant chaos and empty nests, with Dr. Harry Weston trying to keep his household from flying off the rails. Carol was pure chaos mode, flipping the vibe every time she stepped in. Barbara did whatever she wanted, no rules, no breaks, just doing her thing in full force. Dreyfus was basically running the show, while Charlie wandered in like locks were just decoration, not security. Empty Nest hit NBC in 1988, spun out of the Golden Girls universe, and ran 7 seasons with 170 episodes. For its early run, it stayed locked in the top 10, proving it was way more than filler TV. Look past the cozy sitcom surface and this show gets weird fast. Failed pilots, cast shakeups, behind-the-scenes clashes, even dog swaps flying around. Stick around for number 10 because it brings the whole series full circle in the most fitting way possible. Before we jump in, hit like, subscribe, and share this with a friend who swears Dreyfus was the best on set. Now let's get into the countdown. Number 1 hit different because they basically blew up the whole show and left the house sitting empty, then rebuilt it from the ground up like nothing ever went wrong. Most people completely forget that messy reset ever happened. Here's how it started in May 1987, when the Golden Girls Season 2 finale tried to spin off Empty Nest by dropping in the Corliss family out of nowhere and suddenly making them the center of everything. George and Renee Corliss, played by Paul Dooley and Rita Moreno, were dealing with empty nest life plus family chaos like Chuck and their loud neighbor Oliver. No Westons, no Dreyfus, and the reaction was instant. People basically said this was not it. Even the cast could feel it was falling apart in real time. Rita Moreno, who won an Oscar, an Emmy, a Grammy, and a Tony later, called it a very, very bad show. When an OTT winner says the show is bad, that already says everything. The production turned into straight chaos with so many rewrites that nobody even knew the lines anymore. Rita Moreno, a legend who worked with Elvis and Spielberg, was literally tripping over dialogue because the show had no clear direction. Chemistry was gone, and even the Golden Girls cast looked like they wanted out of the whole situation. But then NBC made a wild move that changed everything in 1988. They scrapped it all, rebuilt the idea, and launched Empty Nest with a new cast like Richard Mulligan, Dinah Madoff, and Christy McNichol. They even kept David Leisure but flipped him into Charlie, a cruise ship worker stuck in total sitcom chaos. Same energy, new name, like he got dropped into sitcom witness protection. They even reused the house, handed it to the Westons like the past never happened there. The lesson is simple. Sometimes the idea works, but the execution crashes so hard you have to start over completely. Number 2, NBC basically turned Saturday night into a secret weapon that hit way harder than people remember. By the early 90s, Empty Nest wasn't just a sitcom anymore. It was part of a whole connected TV universe that felt stitched together on purpose. Then came Hurricane Saturday on November 9th, 1991, and NBC went all in with one wild crossover storm, hitting 3 shows in a single night. On the Golden Girls 2-parter, The Monkey Show, the ladies were locked down as the hurricane rolled straight through their world. Then it slammed into Empty Nest, where the Westons were stuck dealing with their own storm chaos in the episode Windy, and things got messy fast. Over on Nurses Be Gone with the Wind pushed the hospital into full crisis mode, with staff scrambling while characters like Rose Nan and Laverne Todd popped up in the mix. Same storm, same props, same fake weather machines, just different casts getting tossed into the same disaster. Behind the scenes, it was pure madness for the crew. One long night of chasing continuity, while the hurricane literally followed viewers from show to show. It turned into something like channel surfing, except the storm never stopped, no matter what sitcom you switched to. This crossover gimmick actually worked because it wasn't random. It was built on a shared universe before that term got overused by TV execs. Same city, same creator, same world, and NBC had slowly built this Saturday block into something people genuinely tuned in for. By the early 90s, Saturday nights on NBC were basically packed wall to wall with Miami-based sitcom energy, all feeding into each other. Empty Nest stood right in the center of it, helping define that whole lineup for years, which makes its origins look even more surprising in hindsight. Number 3, it straight up borrowed its bones from a British sitcom blueprint. Long before Empty Nest became part of NBC's Miami sitcom empire, the core setup already existed with a British accent and probably more tea. The concept was loosely inspired by the UK sitcom Father Dear Father, which ran from 1968 to 1973, following Patrick Glover, a divorced dad raising two daughters while sharing a house with an enormous St. Bernard named H.G., as in H.G. Wells. Now, to be clear, Empty Nest didn't copy it beat for beat. Harry Weston was a widowed pediatrician in Miami, not a British novelist in Hampstead. His daughters were adults with enough baggage to fill Dreyfus's dog bed twice over, but the skeleton of the idea is close enough to make you do a double take. One father, two daughters, one oversized dog, and a household built around generational chaos. So if Empty Nest ever felt a little older than some of the other late 80s sitcoms around it, that might be why. Underneath the NBC polish, the wisecracks, and all that Miami crossover energy, there was a British sitcom blueprint hiding in plain sight. Number 4, B. Arthur versus the Gum Rule Showdown. B. Arthur had a few famously hard boundaries on set, and one of the biggest was chewing gum. She just wasn't having it. That rule became kind of legendary behind the scenes, and multiple cast members confirmed it, so this wasn't just talk, it had real receipts attached to it. Dina Manoff backed it up on record, and David Leisure even said B had a radar that extended about 100 feet, like she could spot gum from across the studio and make you ditch it on the spot. The short version is simple. B. Arthur had a strict set-wide no-gum policy, and she enforced it like law. If you were chewing, you were getting called out. No exceptions, no hiding it. Now Dinah Manoff decided to test that rule, and not just once, but twice. The first time was during a Golden Girls crossover when she showed up chewing gum just to see if the stories were real. It was real. B told her to spit it out, and Dina did. No pushback. But then things escalated when B came over to the Empty Nest set for a guest appearance, and Dina had gum in her mouth again like she was running it back on purpose. B told her the same thing, spit it out. This time Dina smiled and said no, this was her set. B stormed off and the energy flipped instantly, and Dina has made it clear this wasn't an accident or misunderstanding. She knew exactly what she was doing both times, turning it into a long-running 2-act stunt across 2 shows. What looks like a diva clash is really a sitcom-level grudge match playing out with nothing but chewing gum and pure stubborn energy. Number 5, why Barbara really left the screen. Kristy McNichol, who played Barbara, left Empty Nest halfway through its run, and the reason was serious but kept private at the time. On screen, it just looked like Barbara suddenly vanished with no clear explanation, which left viewers confused and talking. Then the show introduced a twist, and off-screen third sister Emily suddenly dropped into the family like she had always been there all along. Lisa Reif joined in 1992 as Emily Weston, the daughter who was supposedly away at college this whole time. Viewers weren't buying it, and the reaction was loud and messy. It was always going to be a tough replacement situation. Lisa herself admitted the whole setup felt awkward, and David Leisure later called it the impossible job. Emily only lasted 13 episodes before the show quietly wrote her back out and sent her off to college again like the whole detour never fully clicked. The energy just didn't stick. Later, McNichol revealed the real reason behind her departure was related to bipolar disorder, something she chose to handle privately during that time. She later returned for the 1995 series finale, and that episode became her final on-camera acting performance, marking a major turning point. After that, she only did voice work, including Extreme Ghostbusters in 1997 and Invasion America in 1998, before stepping away from on-camera roles completely. She officially retired from acting in 2001. So Barbara's exit wasn't about drama or story reshuffling behind the scenes. It was Kristy McNichol making a personal decision to step back for her mental health. And that context changes how her final return hits, because it wasn't just a cameo, it carried real weight. Number 6, the guest star bench on Empty Nest was stacked in a way people seriously sleep on today. This show had a lineup that looks almost unreal in hindsight, like it quietly collected future legends without making a big deal about it. We're talking Phil Hartman, Matthew Perry, Joey Lawrence, Garth Brooks, Jane Lynch, and Mayim Bialik all passing through Community Medical Center like it was just another normal day in Miami. That kind of mix makes you do a double take when you rewatch it. Future household names were just floating through a cozy sitcom about a widowed pediatrician and his giant dog, and it gives the whole show this wild retro effect. You're watching an old episode, then suddenly you're like, wait, that's that person before the fame even kicked in. Most of these actors weren't the versions of themselves people recognize today. They were just sharp, rising talent moving toward bigger pop culture moments, and you can feel that energy in every appearance. Mayim Bialik is the perfect example of how deep this goes. She showed up in 2 episodes as a patient named Lori Kincaid, years before Blossom and long before the Big Bang Theory blew her up. And here's the kicker, both Empty Nest and Blossom were tied to the same production world, and Bialik later said those Empty Nest appearances basically worked like an audition for Blossom. That guest spot wasn't random, it was low-key a screen test playing out in real time. Looking back, the Empty Nest guest list hits way harder than anyone realized back then. What looked like a simple sitcom rotation was actually a quiet launch pad for future stars just passing through before everything changed. Number 7, Dreyfus was basically a 3-dog operation hiding in plain sight. Every great sitcom needs a scene stealer, and on Empty Nest that role belonged to Dreyfus, the giant lovable dog who somehow always looks smarter than half the humans around him. Most viewers knew Dreyfus was played primarily by Bear, a St. Bernard Golden Retriever mix, and yes, that massive shaggy face was 100% real. He looked exactly like the kind of dog that would take over your couch, your routine, and eventually your emotional control without even trying. But Bear wasn't carrying everything alone. His brother Julio stepped in for the more high-energy moments because he was the action-focused dog of the duo. In other words, when Dreyfus had to do more than just stand there looking cute and mildly judging everyone, Julio was the one handling the movement and chaos. Here's where it gets even better. Julio is actually the dog you see running around Richard Mulligan in the early opening credits. So if you remember Harry Weston getting dragged through that intro, you were mostly watching the stunt dog, not the main face of Dreyfus himself. So the truth is, Dreyfus wasn't just one canine actor, he was a full tag team system working behind the scenes. Bear handled the calm, iconic presence, Julio handled the action, and later on, Bear's son Bingo joined the lineup too, keeping the whole operation going strong. Together, they created one of the most memorable sitcom dogs of that era, and honestly, that level of coordination is more organized than most human casts could ever manage. Number 8, Joey Zuzu basically saved him during the reboot shakeup. When Empty Nest got rebuilt after that messy Golden Girls pilot situation, one actor made it through the wreckage without getting replaced, David Leisure, and that wasn't random luck. By the time the retooled version launched in 1988, Leisure was already nationally known as Joey Zuzu. The smirking commercial con artist who could sell anything with a grin like honesty was just optional. That character had turned him into a real pop culture name, the kind people recognized instantly. NBC saw that momentum and ran with it. Multiple production notes and show history point to the idea that Empty Nest was shaped in part as a vehicle for Leisure specifically because Joey Zuzu had already made him valuable on-screen currency. So even though Charlie Dietz became the actual sitcom role, the truth is Joey Zuzu was the one who kicked the door open. Same actor, same energy, just swapped out of ads and dropped into a sitcom world that was still trying to find its rhythm. The timing lined up perfectly for both sides. Leisure brought instant recognition to a brand new show trying to stabilize, and Empty Nest gave him a place to keep that smirking chaos alive after the commercials stopped running. By the time the dust settled, Charlie Dietz had fully taken over the space Joey Zuzu helped unlock. Same guy, same grin, just a different setup for the same slick energy. Quick check, who was the standout character for you on Empty Nest? Drop it in the comments if one really stuck out. And while you're there, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into classic retro TV chaos. Number 9, it actually spawned its own Full Hospital spinoff, and things got way bigger than anyone expected. By 1991, Empty Nest had already pulled off a rare move, going from a shaky Golden Girls offshoot idea to a legit hit that held its own. NBC looked at that success and basically said, "This world needs more scrubs, more charts, and way more chaos under fluorescent lights." That's how Nurses was born, and it dropped on September 14th, 1991, with a whole new focus inside the same community medical center building. Same hospital setting as Empty Nest, just different floors, different problems, and a totally different kind of daily meltdown happening in the background. The core cast came in strong and loud. You had tough head nurse Annie Rowland keeping order when things went off the rails, sarcastic Texas divorcee Sandy Miller always chasing romance, and Julie Milbury, the wide-eyed newcomer who somehow stayed overwhelmed and oddly effective at the same time. Then there was Gina Cuevas, a Latin nurse who constantly talked about her fictional homeland San Pio like it was real history, plus a sarcastic orderly named Paco, an arrogant doctor, and even a male nurse nobody fully trusted at first glance. It was a full-on rotating chaos machine inside one hospital, and somehow it worked better than it should have. Over 3 seasons, the show kept shifting gears, new cast changes, story shakeups, even a white-collar criminal doing court-ordered hospital service, which added a whole extra layer of tension. By the final season, even Linda Lavin showed up as the new administrator, pushing the energy in a different direction. It never fully matched Empty Nest's ratings, but it still pushed out 68 episodes before wrapping in 1994. For something that started as a spin-off nobody really expected, it ended up building a surprisingly solid little TV empire inside one shared hospital universe. Number 10, Susan Harris basically reshuffled her own TV family tree like it was nothing. Richard Mulligan and Dina Minoff weren't new to each other when they landed on Empty Nest together. They had already crossed paths under Susan Harris on her earlier hit soap, and that history makes everything way more interesting than it looks at first glance. On Soap, Mulligan played Burt Campbell, while Manoff played Elaine Lefkowitz, a spoiled mob boss's daughter who ended up marrying Burt's stepson, Danny. So, the relationship web wasn't simple at all. It was tangled, messy, and full of those wild soap-style twists that made the whole show feel like controlled chaos. In other words, they weren't father and daughter at all in that universe. They were stepfather-in-law and daughter-in-law, which already sounds like a sitcom logic puzzle gone wrong. That's exactly the kind of layered mess Soap was known for. So when Susan Harris brought them into Empty Nest, it was basically like she grabbed 2 actors from one chaotic family setup, moved them into a brand new sitcom, and quietly reassigned their whole dynamic like she was reorganizing seating at a packed Thanksgiving table. And somehow, it just worked again, and there you have it, the wildest, most surprising facts about Empty Nest. Some of these twists were straight up unexpected, and others might have hit you with a wave of Saturday night nostalgia. Which fact caught you off guard the most, and what did we miss that deserves a shout out? Drop it all in the comments and don't hold back. If this brought back even a few memories of those classic TV nights, hit like, share this with someone who grew up on these shows, and subscribe for more deep dives into the series we all used to watch without missing a beat. There's always more behind the scenes than what made it to the screen. Until next time, this is $21.